Julia writes, I'm exploring forming a nonprofit that will provide scholarships and financial assistance to families in need. What is the ideal board size for a new nonprofit? I have some very reputable candidates in mind, but I don't want to have so many people on the board that I lose control of the organization. Okay, this is a question I
These are great
address.
questions, Ben.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
are really good.
Uh,
Yeah.
right. And yeah, this I know this one's good because I address it almost every time I work with an organization that is new and forming and working with founders on this. Literally, everybody needs to be thinking about this and planning for it. So it really depends on the type of organization it is. That's going to influence what the needs are and what you're trying to balance. If it's an organization that really needs specific programmatic expertise, that's going to push you in a certain direction, maybe needing a few more board members than a very small, basic organization that's going to be simpler to run. Uh, if it's also going to be an organization that's heavy on fundraising, needs people with deep pockets, really good connections, you might need a little more or a few more board members just to get as many of those connections as possible. But you're always balancing that with having too many people on the board and losing focus, especially in the early days. My advice generally boils down to minimum of 3, because that's you're going to need that to pass IRS scrutiny. And most organizations are looking at 5 to 7 if they're, if they're new and relatively straightforward and don't have some other need. So that's kind of the sweet spot, in my opinion. In most cases, you can do more, but once you start getting to 9, 10, 11, that starts to become a big board. Not the biggest. I've seen bigger. I'm sure you have. But that becomes harder to wrangle, especially in those early days when you really want to keep it tight, keep a smaller group, really work through that vision for the organization going forward. That's usually better accomplished with a smaller group of board members than 11 plus.
Yeah, yeah, Ben, I want to echo your thoughts with one thing that I think should be introduced all the way back in the early part of the startup phase. Is you're not, yes, you're building that founders board, that startup board, but also, what do you think the board's going to look like 5 years from now? What are your term? When you turn over, I always say,
Mm-hmm.
especially for new organizations, when they get to that second generation of board members, that's when founders are founders. People, they have a special connection
Mm-hmm.
and all that. So what you might need now, what you need later, and is usually a little bit more. You start and
Right,
you
right.
also have, don't forget about just diversity issues, and you're just trying to put a picture out there, and that's different for every organization. So with
Yeah.
that said, Ben, and I've always talked with people like yourself who help getting that startup, is I think define not the board, but what's the sort of the min and max, and have
Mm-hmm.
that flexibility to
Sure.
float between them. I like 7. 5 is there, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes 5 becomes problematic because if someone doesn't show, and it gets tight. So it seems
Yeah.
to be in
Yeah.
that 7 up range. And then
Mm-hmm.
not talk about the ideal size because we don't know in 3 or 5 years. But maybe set the
Right.
max at like we shouldn't be over 15. So or something so that you're not forcing an early bylaws change when you're
Yeah.
trying to get started. It's a distraction. But the founding board, you might start out with 5 or 7 people, but no, you can go to a max of 15 down the road, or
Mm-hmm.
12, or some number that you're comfortable with.
Right.
And I just think about the that founders board will have what in later years, Ben, I don't know if you agree with the statement, more discussions that might seem micromanaging because you're
Mm-hmm.
starting up an organization that future boards won't be dealing with.
Right. Right.
Opening bank accounts, doing all the stuff you have to do as a startup just to get rolling.
Right. Yeah, and the tricky balance there, more board members in theory can spread that load a little bit, so get more hands on deck. However, it can also slow things down, make things more complicated, make board members perhaps more inclined to, leave off some of the work to other people. That just depends on who you get and the environment that you can create for the board members.
Exactly.
So it is tricky. You need to know who it is you're bringing on and know the way they work and their general commitment to things that they agree to. That will help you know what is the right size to make this work. And I would say, rather than spending too much time recruiting in the very early days, get to a number that you can achieve and spend that time creating a good environment that's going to help you more easily bring people in the future.
Exactly.
If you can master working with 5 board members and get that really tight and get your processes all worked out so that new people, when they join, they walk into a process that is running smoothly, doesn't seem chaotic,
Exactly.
seems like a board is on top of things, that is going to really help. And when you do expand, the board members are going to have a better experience.
Yeah, and quick case and study. It was a research-based newer organization getting started. In the beginning, we had two things. We needed some people who are willing to talk about the nitty-gritty of getting started and fundraising. But they're research based, and later on we'll start filling out with scientists and other researchers and things who are into the programmatic side. That might not happen till year 2, 3, 4. We need that set of expertise, but we probably don't want someone with a PhD in chemical engineering sitting there while we're trying to set up our systems and get all this stuff.
Well, that's funny because most often when I work with organizations like that, they tend to start with the subject matter experts because that's what they know. But you have a very good point. What you want from a board in the early days is more operational and helping build those foundations and those processes. The subject matter experts are not always the best for that, but it's a balance.